When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Frantz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. You understand me? I was born black, I live black, and I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
Hey, peace. Uhuru, Amani na Google. It's simple. I just want to be free. Peace to the family. Welcome to another study session. This is the Blueprint for Black Power study session. As I examine with you all that are viewing this, examining Blueprint for Black Power, Dr. Amerson Wilson's book, the moral, political, and economic imperative for the 21st century. And we are going to be examining chapter 2 today. We started chapter 2 in our last session. So we're going to continue examining that, going through that chapter. And tonight is not going to be a long one for me. It's been a long day. So I'm not going to keep you guys too long in this session, but expect to see me sometime this week to continue to look at this. So I'm probably going to do another one of these sessions before next Sunday, because next Sunday I might not be able to hold a session. I'll be in DC. The African National Women's Organization is hosting a rally and a march in DC. So I'll be down there participating in that rally and march. That's on Sunday, next Sunday. But we will have our podcast on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Me, Natasha, and Frank will be back, continuing to examine the ISIS papers. So I'm excited, man, to look at all of these, all of our great thinkers examining their work, because I think this is something that's lacking in the school system, that the colonial school system, where we send our children every day, where they're being miseducated, and we have to do double work and making sure that we, give them a re-education, or we counter a lot of the information that they're receiving in these schools. So peace to the chat. Welcome. Always appreciative of the support. Always. And so anybody that's viewing who is not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel so I can continue to, get the support and continue to put this information out. Well, I'm gonna put it out anyway, but the support makes it that much more. You give me that more inspiration and motivation, to continue to do this work. So the power is the people. I guess as Fred Hampton would say, I get high off the people. So definitely like and share so we can get as many people to be a part of these discussions as possible. So I'm gonna get right into it. Like I said, I probably go a half an hour at the most. Definitely won't go an hour, but we're gonna make the best of this time, man. We're gonna maximize our time here. So I'm on page 29, property and power, page 29. So I'm gonna get right to it. So it seems apropos at this juncture to emphasize a statement made by Thomas Dye. Power is never equally distributed. There is no power where power is equal. For power to be exercised, the power holder must control base values. Inequality of power in social systems is correlated with inequality of the distribution of power resources within them. The distribution of power resources is rarely, if ever, randomly distributed among the individual and group constituents of a society. As we have already intimated, inequality of power between individuals and groups must evolve from their unequal share of important or relevant resources of power, among which includes property, wealth, organization, social prestige, social legitimacy, number of adherents, various kinds of knowledge ability, and leadership skills, technological skills, control of jobs, control of information, ability to manipulate the symbolic environment, and ability to apply force and violence. It is the first two items on this list we shall now very briefly discuss, right? So he's laying down right there. We talked about the basis of power. He's going back into covering some of those bases of power. And those things I just discussed, I mean, think about how much collectively, how many of those things that we have control over where there's no dependency on someone else. I think in today's society, what we see under colonialism with neocolonialism, there's this appearance of Black power, right? And wherever African people are, there's this appearance of Black power. But what really is happening is that you have Black people in positions that are serving white domination, white political and economic domination of African people. So, you know, we have to capture these bases of power in order for us to be a self-determined people. So he's going in the next well, in this section, he's just going to be focusing on property and wealth as basis of power. So on page 30 at the top, property, wealth, and power. Property and wealth represent a class of power resources commonly referred to as economic resources. As Dye contends, control of economic resources provides a continuous and important base of power in any society. Economic organizations decide the basic economic question, or who gets what, right? For me, like, economics, man, is the basis of everything. All institutions, all ideas in the society, relations in the society is based off of food, clothing, and shelter, right? To be able to have access to those things, because this is how you live. You can't live without these things, right? These are the necessities, right? These are life-sustaining things right here. And so you want to be able to at least have control over those life-sustaining things or access to those things. And so that's the basis of any relationship. Somebody may have those things that you need, so you do trade with them. You have something that they need, and then you may come into some sort of social contract and build some society, create government, rules, regulations, who gets what and all of that. Now, within that society, though, that's created, whoever has control over those resources, that's why if, in a communal society, everybody has access to those things, right? Or everybody has access to those things and they're evenly distributed. Now, in a colonial society, there's people who control those life-sustaining resources and institutions, and people only have access to it at the behest of those people who control them. So there may be a point where you don't have access to it because it's dependent on the mood and the attitude of those people who have control of it. And so this is why this is important to understand African people condition. A lot of our people are walking around just like not even conscious to that fact that their historical enemy is the one that has control over those life-sustaining institutions, those things that you need to be able to survive. The same people who put you in chains, the same people who committed genocide against your ancestors and continue to do these things. in today's society. So being conscious of that will make you act in a way that is revolutionary. It'll make you act in a way where you want to overturn these contradictions. And so you know that there's something fundamentally wrong when we participate in a society that's detrimental to our survival. And many people probably don't think it's so, but just look at the statistics. But we're not going to get too deep into that right now. I want to continue on this next paragraph on page 30. Economic power is the power to decide what will be produced, how much it will cost, how many people will be employed, what their wages will be, what the prices of goods and services will be, what profits will be made, and how these profits will be distributed, and how fast the economy will grow. That's power, that's control. He goes on, Dr. Wilson says, in capitalistic America, the foundation of economic power is private property, whose ownership not only refers to real estate, but also to the ownership of the means of production, of accumulated capital, factories, machinery, etc., wealth surplus, production, or surplus material goods as belonging to private individuals or groups instead of to the people or nation as a whole. Racial and class domination fundamentally involves the unequal interaction between the owners of property and wealth and the propertyless and poor, the greater power residing in the hands of the first group. And within this global society that we're in, that's the European. Now, I want this private property thing. I remember in class, they had us reading Rousseau, right? This French philosopher. When I was reading this, it made me think about something that Rousseau said. I wish I had it on screen for you guys, man, but I'll tell you where I got it from. So I'm gonna read this about private property, just a few sentences, because it's so pertinent to what we're talking about right now. So this is Rousseau. This is from a discourse on the origin of inequality. Now, check out what Rousseau says. He says, the first man having enclosed a piece of ground, bethought himself of saying, this is mine, and found people simple enough, to believe him, was the real founder of civil society, right? So this trick or this manipulation, whether or by force, but to say, hey, this property right here, I own this, and for someone to to acquiesce to that idea that this person could own this land, that can privatize nature. Like that was the fool. That was the beginning of civil society, he says, from how many crimes, wars, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortunes might not anyone have saved mankind by pulling up the stakes or filling up the ditch and crying to his fellows, beware of listening to this impostor. You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and the earth itself to nobody. Rousseau was on to something here. I can't front. He was on to something here. He said, beware of listening to this imposter, that person who said, hey, this land is mine. I own this, right? Said pulling up the stakes, filling up the dishes with dirt, right? You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and that earth itself to nobody, right? So we have to understand that, man. The European has us thinking that they can privatize everything from land to water, right? Everything to land to water. That first person who did that, somebody should have off with his head. You're gonna have all these problems. Yeah, you think you own this? Here you go. So, hey, peace to the chat, peace to everybody. So on, man. Appreciate y'all. I'm gonna go a little bit longer. So the next paragraph, I'm on page 30, the second paragraph. The concept of property in advanced capitalist society is complex. property resources as owned by private individuals and private institutions rather than the society or government, that is private property or the community. I mean, but property is one of the central defining characteristics of capitalist ideology and societies. The private ownership of property refers to far more than the ownership of concrete things like land, houses, factories, personal items, production tools, machinery, and the like. Property also refers to rights and interests and claims and to things, to certain privileges relative to things, people, and activities. This includes property as a right of use or disposition. This is under capitalism, though. You could privatize everything. They privatize life, organisms, right? The private ownership of things, rights and claims as property, combined with the right and the freedom to negotiate binding legal contracts, permits private persons or businesses to obtain control, employ, and dispose of property resources as they see fit. In sum, Baislin reminds us to think of property as being of two kinds: thing property and rights property. The latter may refer to pieces of paper like stocks, certificates, and bonds, representing certain direct entitlements relating to certain things and productive activities, such as the right in one person of the fruit of another's labor. Baislin, this is wage slavery, right? It's moved from chattel slavery to wage slavery. That's what he's describing right here. And then, I hate injecting Marx, man, but Dr. Franz Krauss Wilson talks about this as well, but alienation, man, because Marx talks about alienation. Well, when he talks about it, he's talking about how we controlled the fruits of our labor. Under capitalism, they're able to control the fruits of your labor. So they alienate you from your own work, from your own production. You no longer own those things. This is slavery. This is what happened under chattel slavery, and this is what continues to happen under colonialism. So ultimately, property is what the state, I'm on page 31 at the top. Ultimately, property as what the state, as adjudicated by its legislative bodies and courts, say it is. The things, rights, claims, and privileges to which the state accords its enforcements and protection. The central function of the modern state is the protection and regulation of the private property system, to defend the owners of property and wealth from the propertyless and poor. With the ownership or claim to certain properties and rights goes the right to exercise certain privileges and powers from which those who do not own or hold claim to those properties and rights are excluded. The ownership of property demarcates the borderline between inclusion and exclusion. With the ownership of property comes the right to exercise more rights and privileges, then comes with the lack of ownership, right? That's why you have two worlds, two societies. This is poles and metropoles. Consequently, the ownership of property is one of the most important bases of power. Betham elaborates this point. Quote, central to the social organization of power are the processes of exclusion, typically embodied in rules, which prohibit general access to key resources and which determine who may acquire the use or possessions of them, and by what means. These are usually called rules of property, and it is through the possession of or the privileged access to property that some people acquire and maintain power over others who lack or are denied such access. All right. And this is with African people, with Black people. We have become that other. We have become the people who have been excluded from civil society. And I mean, it's okay because we shouldn't be looking to integrate into the society anyway, right? I think this exclusion allows for the to heighten the contradiction within the society where we have to overturn it. You would think, right? And this is why political education is important. You know, most people don't have an analysis of the system that will liberate them from the oppression and exploitation because they adopt the ideology of the colonialists, of the bourgeois, who's going to put out an ideology, who's going to put out a theory, who's going to educate you or miseducate you to sustain the system, to work in favor of the colonialists, to where you work, your work benefits the colonialists more than it benefits you, collectively and individually. And so he makes a point here, Dr. Wilson, about property and I want to go right up here at the top of page 31. He makes a point that made me think of Huey P. Newton earlier. He talked about what do you say? The central function of the modern state is the protection and regulation of the private property system, to defend the owners of property and wealth from the propertyless and poor. So I'm going to play this is a minute long, but I think that it's relevant, very relevant to what Dr. Wilson is saying. So I'm going to share my screen. This is Huey P. Newton. All right.
Black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people, because we're brutalized. The police in our community occupy our area, our community, as a foreign troop occupies territory. And the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize us and murder us. Because they have their orders to do so. And just as the soldiers in Vietnam have their orders to destroy the Vietnamese people, the police in our community couldn't possibly be there to protect our property, because we own no property. They couldn't possibly be there to see that we receive the due process of law, for the simple reason that the police themselves deny us the due process of law. And so it's very apparent that the police are only in our community, not for our security, but the security of the business owners in the community, and also to see that the status quo is kept intact.
All right. So as you can see, that connects to what Dr. Amos Wilson just laid out. I remember one time listening to Dead Prez album. I don't know which speech is from, but I was listening to Dead Prez album, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, he made a statement, right, about the police and the reason why we need the police, and the only reason that we need police in our community because of the contradiction between those who have and those who don't have, the have-nots, right? Because if it wasn't for the police, the have-nots, who the only reason they don't have is because of imperialism and colonialism, right? Because they have been robbed for everything that they have, they will go back and get everything that is theirs, everything that is owed to them. And so you need this military and police to protect the property and to protect the thieves. They're there to protect the thieves at the end of the day. There's an interesting, I won't go too much in it, maybe at another time, but there's this article that I read. Got to find out who the author is. I have it. As a matter of fact, I'll put it too in the Google Drive. Damn, who's the author of it? But the article was about the state, the creation of the state, and how the creation of the state was like a racket, and it was making this comparison of how, how the mafia goes into a community, and they have this racket, and they sort of have this control over the livelihoods of the people in the community, and they create this government or protective government for the people in that community. But these same people, who are supposed to be protecting them, if taxes are not paid, if they don't show a deference to pay taxes, these are the same people who will be committing the atrocities against you or committing harm against you, right? And so it's like this comparison to the same thing going back to this guy looks at the history of Europe and the development of the bureaucracy there. So, another time, I'll bring that back up another time, but I don't want to digress. So page 31, I'm just going to go through a couple more paragraphs before we close out. So Dr. Wilson, he says, hence power relations are inextricably reflective of property relations. The dominance and subordination of classes and races are constituted by the power deriving from the ownership of property, more so from control over key resources and the means of production. The propertyless classes and races, by the fact of their propertylessness, are compelled to bow to the demands of the property as a condition for obtaining their daily bread. Therein is the basis for dominance and subordination. The unequal distribution of power between whites and blacks in America, in accordance with the greater ownership of property and capital, and therefore power by whites, did not originate from the fabled economic genius of the former relative to the lack of it in the latter. That's bourgeois propaganda right there. I'm going to read that again. The unequal distribution of power between whites and blacks in America, in accordance with the greater ownership of property and capital, and therefore power by whites, did not originate from the fabled economic genius of the former relative to the lack of it in the latter. And this is around the world, not just in America. White power, based on the white monopolistic ownership of property and accumulated capital, is the alchemical product of blood and fire, that is, of the genocidal murder by whites of Native Americans, the outright theft of their lands and resources, the brutal enslavement and murder of Africans, as well as the naked, direct exploitation of their uncompensated labor, all made possible by the unrestrained use of white-instigated physical violence, psychic terrorism, and psychopolitical economic manipulation. Africans were brought to the Americas as the private property of Europeans. The surplus production of their labor was expropriation and accumulation, both during and after their enslavement. This, along with the theft of Indian lands, are the fundamental sources of European American, African American property power relations to this very moment. Moreover, white America's long history of 100% racial quotas in favor of whites and its use of racial discrimination as a standard form of cartel power has provided whites and some of their non-white immigrant groups imitators with the property means of bending the will and shaping the behavior of relatively propertyless dependent Black Americans. Cross depicts this relationship in tables 2.1 and 2.2. Now, I have tables 2.1 and 2.2 that I'm gonna pull up on the screen, but not tonight, right? Because I want us to go through these racial quotas that Dr. Wilson is talking about. I want to go through that thoroughly, and that's probably going to take me like at least 30 minutes, because I want to definitely look at these racial quotas, and particularly he's focused on the United States and how, like today, when we look at wealth distribution today and why it's overwhelmingly in the hands of Europeans, it's going back to these racial quotas. Of course, like colonialism, but under colonialism, there is a particular group of people who was excluded, right? There was other groups who may have been excluded, but they were able to merge themselves, right, into whiteness. And so those other people who immigrated and came even after the African, right, was able to surpass enslaved Africans, and then those Africans who freed themselves from chattel slavery after the Civil War still was able to surpass them, is because of racism that was created under the institution of colonialism. So that justified the exclusion of African people and indigenous people in this land and around the world, because Europeans went to Africa with the same attitude, right? So I want to quickly, though, I want to go back to influence as power, just to make this connection of why basis of power is important and how, because of the Europeans' capture or control of the basis of power, are able to continue to sustain this control over African people. They're able to use this influence. So I'm going to quickly just go back to the first chapter and read this paragraph on page 15. At the bottom of page 15, Dr. Wilson said, influence as power involves the power holder's ability to gain his subordinate subjects voluntary acceptance of and behavioral compliance with the power holder's interpretation of reality, value judgments, prescriptive suggestions, and commands based on the power holder's perceived status, resources, personal/social attributes, competence, expertise, or legitimate authority, right? This competence and legitimate authority comes from the capture of those, the control of those bases of power. Right here, based on the power holder's perceived status, resources, right? Because then, again, this goes back to, we've had this discussion about having control over the needs and desires, things that another group wants, another group needs, or their desires. If you have those things, right, that's a base of power, right? And you're able to exercise influence and competent authority over those people, right? But we have to, this is why, man, this is why education is so important. This is why control of our own media is so important, because we have to dictate what is valuable to us. When we let another group of people dictate or influence us and tell us, manipulate us into what is valuable, and we buy into that and we believe that, then they got us. They got us on a leash, hook and sink, or whatever that saying is. Hook, line, and sinker. Hook, line, and sinker. Right. So really quick before I close out, let me go through. And peace, man. Appreciate everybody joining in. I just want to go through the chat a bit. I'm a close out in a minute, just because I have to get up early, go to New York. The work don't stop. I hear that. That's a fact, man. Hey, all in due time. All in due time. If you build it, they will come. And I'm like, I'm gonna be honest. Like, this is me stepping out of my comfort zone. I've been doing this for a while now, though. In regards to the podcast, I would say we started doing it maybe like this might be like 2.5 years. But I kind of like was, pushed into doing this. And of course, like, for liberation, I'm down for the cause. What you need me to do. But with this book and other books that I think that our people should be studying, discussions that we need to be having, I want to just sharpen myself and continue to do these as much as possible. So I'm gonna keep working and make these discussions, make these podcasts, improving these podcasts, make them better and better. So stay tuned for that, man, because I'm gonna keep going at it, and find ways too to get more and more people involved in these conversations, these discussions, these examinations of our ancestors and these texts. I think it's important that we do so, because this is part of the fight to liberate ourselves. So yeah, peace. The amount let me see. People who sleepwalk through life, I hear that. But it's not their fault though, right? We have to take accountability, right? But we know why our people are sick. We're dealing with mental health issues. We understand why, suicide rate is high in our community. We understand why homicide rates are high in our community. We understand why heart disease is high in our community. We understand why diabetes is high in our community. All of this is a result of colonialism, right? And so, a lot of our people are born into this system. They're born into it, and it's like, when you're born into it, this is all you know. When you're being indoctrinated through the media, you're being sent to the schools where more indoctrination and miseducation is taking place. So, unless the reason I'm on the path that I'm on is not because of something that happened in my household, and it's not because of something that I seen on TV or something that happened in school. The path that I'm on came about because somebody put a book in my hand that really woke me up to the reality of my situation and who I am, and it made me want to study more. And the funny thing is, like, a lot of the things in that book that I read, like today, I probably would disagree with a lot of it, right? But there was enough truth in there that set me on my path, and that was good enough. And so I kept on inquiring and pursuing the truth. It did enough to make me question my reality, made me question my existence, and that's all it took, you know. And so, and again, that didn't happen in the school. So with these podcasts, maybe somebody will come across it and be like, "Oh, you know, let me read Dr. Emerson Wilson. This guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about." And that's all we can hope for. And of course, we keep doing this work. One day, man, we're gonna form like Voltron to overturn colonialism like it's nothing. The European, you know, his time to dominate over African life is up. It's up. So just going through this. Yapo, yes. Just like an abusive personal or work relationship, the anatomy of all abusive relationships is the same. It's a fact, man. Microcosm, study on a microcosm, you can understand what's happening. You know, on a microcosm, you can understand what's happening on a macrocosm, right? Between individuals and between groups, it's all the same. All right. Let me see. Scroll down, man. Peace to you all. Peace to you all. Yeah, trying to keep it coming. Revolutionary greetings, yes, to you too. So we going in the last two right here. I'm gonna throw our people in prisons for little or nothing, while straight up war criminals and billion-dollar thieves not only don't go to prison, but are put in charge of the country and protected. Yeah, I mean they write the rules. That's what I'm saying. The thieves is writing the rules to the game. That's why, man. So based off of that, I'm gonna pull up this Huey P. Newton quote and end it there, because one of my favorite Huey P. Newton quotes from In Defense of Self-Defense. In Defense of Self-Defense. Seems like U.S. colonial elites went to war with the British Empire over a choice of paradigms: domestic colonized oppressed Black and indigenous people versus international oppression of Black and indigenous people. Yeah, that's what I be building on. That's what I talk about. Even in my class, I try to get the students to recognize that, that distinction and like what really took place. They talk about revolutions. Revolutions, what? It was a transfer of power. The power dynamic between African people, indigenous people, and Europeans did not change. There was just transfers of power that were taking place. So let me pull up this Huey P. Newton quote, and we're gonna end it like this, man. And this is Huey P. Newton in Defense of Self-Defense, which embodies my attitude when it comes to colonialism. And I will hope it embodies the attitude, would embody the attitude of everyone who is a freedom fighter. So I'm gonna share my screen. I like this quote so much, I would end every podcast with it, but I ain't gonna do that though. Ain't gonna do that. All right, here we go. June 20th, 1967. All right, so where I'm gonna start at? Right here, when the oppressor makes a vicious attack against freedom fighters, because of the way that such freedom fighters choose to go about their liberation, then we know we are moving in the direction of our liberation. The racist dog oppressors have no rights, which oppressed Black people are bound to respect. As long as the racist dog pollute the earth with the evil of their actions, they do not deserve any respect at all. and the rules of their game written in the people's blood are beneath contempt. I should have started before the paragraph before that, but that paragraph right there, though, that embodies what I feel, what I think when it comes to colonialism. The oppressor must be harassed until his doom. He must have no peace by day or by night. The slaves have always outnumbered the slave masters. The power of the oppressor rests upon the submission of the people. When Black people really unite and rise up in all their splendid millions, then they will have the strength to smash injustice. We do not understand the power in our numbers. We are millions and millions of Black people scattered across the continent and throughout the Western Hemisphere. There are more Black people in America than the total population of many countries that now enjoy full membership in the UN. They have power, and their power is based primarily on the fact that they are organized and united with each other. They are recognized by the powers of the world. We, with all our numbers, are recognized by no one. In fact, we do not even recognize our own selves. We are unaware of the potential power latent in our numbers. In 1967, in the midst of a hostile racist nation whose hidden racism is rising to the surface at a phenomenal speed, we are still so blind to our critical fight for our very survival that we are continuing to function in petty, feudal ways. Divided, confused, fighting among ourselves. We are still in the elementary stage of throwing rocks, sticks, empty wine bottles, and beer cans at a racist cop who lie in wait for a chance to murder unarmed Black people. The racist cops have worked out a system for suppressing these spontaneous rebellions that flare up from the anger, frustration, and desperation of the masses of Black people. We can no longer afford the dubious luxury of the terrible casualties wantonly inflicted upon us by the cops during spontaneous rebellions, right? This is something, I'm gonna stop there, man, go through this whole thing, though, in defense of self-defense. But we don't, everything, see, there's a part in here, though. Oh, okay, I gotta go back to this is the paragraph I missed. So this is where I'm gonna end it at. The power structure inflicts pain and brutality among the peoples, then provide control outlets for the pain in ways least likely to upset them or interfere with their process of exploitation. The people must repudiate the channels established as tricks and deceitful snares by the exploiter oppressor. The people must oppose everything the oppressor supports and support everything that he opposes. If Black people go about their struggle for liberation in the way that the oppressor dictates and sponsors, then we will have degenerated to the level of groveling flunkies for the oppressor himself. All right, yeah, Uhuru family. All right, man, I'm gonna have to end it there. Man, appreciate everybody for joining. Again, I'm gonna try to do this sometime this week because next Sunday I won't be able to go live. But I want to appreciate everybody for jumping on, and like and share this. Make sure y'all promote this so we can get more and more people on. And so until next time, y'all, peace and power. Uhuru, keep fighting. Black power. All power to the people.